investment partners, the European Union can play and does play a catalytic role in unleashing the productive capacity of our economy, but also to help equip our people, especially young people, to participate in the economy of the future. And we hope and that we can continue to rely on the support of the European Union and its member states in our efforts to address a number of our challenges, particularly how we can alleviate poverty and how we can also transition to a low-carbon economy, a feat that many of your countries in Europe have been able to achieve or are on the way to achieving more completely. But also how we can invest in climate-resilient infrastructure and grow our industrial capacity. This summit is taking place at a time of global uncertainty, a global uncertainty which we spoke a little bit about in our tete-a-tete, which is characterized by rising unilateralism, economic nationalism, and a retreat from what we've always wanted to advance, which is adherence to international law, a world order that seeks to advance all nations, which is also departing from what we would call human rights culture. We welcome the EU's support for multilateral institutions and the fundamental principles of the United Nations. We hope to work closely with the EU, as we've often done, as well as other partners to strengthen and reform institutions of global governance in order to make them more inclusive, but also to be capable of meeting the challenges of the times that we are living in and the future. We should collectively strengthen our voice, working together. And if there ever was a time when it is absolutely necessary for partners who share the same values to work together, this is the time, particularly when multilateralism is under attack, particularly when the world order process is also being weakened. This is the time to work together in defense of what we believe in: democracy, the rule of law, including the respect for international law and international humanitarian law. So we welcome the support of the EU for Africa's development needs. African relations with the EU should be built on a mutually beneficial partnership in the spirit of shared ownership, responsibility, respect, and mutual accountability. And we will also discuss our shared interests to advance peace, security, stability, and sustainable development. So we welcome you. This summit for us is important as it deepens and broadens our strategic partnership. We also want to thank you as the EU for supporting South Africa's presidency of the G20. You are one bloc that has demonstrated absolute positive support for the work that we have now started as president of the G20, and your participation in the various iterations that are part of the G20 process is supportive, is very positive, and very progressive. So you strengthen our resolve to host the G20 almost 120 meetings, which will culminate with the Leaders' Summit later this year, where we will have the privilege of receiving you once again to South Africa. And with those words, I welcome both of you to the most beautiful country in the world and the most beautiful city that you have ever visited, Cape Town. So welcome. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you. So it's now my pleasure to hand over to yourself, President Costa, to say a few words, and thereafter to Ursula von der Leyen.
Thank you, Mr. President, Honorable President Cyril Ramaphosa, dear Ursula, ministers, members of the ambassadors, members of both delegations. Thank you, President Ramaphosa, for your warm hospitality and for bringing us together here in Cape Town. And it's a great honor for us to be here in this summit, the first since 2018. The world has changed profoundly in these past 7 years. Pandemics, conflicts here in Africa, in Middle East, in Europe, multilateral commitments are being tested, and the rules-based international order faces growing challenges. Protectionism, economic coercion, and hybrid threats undermine stability, while new technologies disrupt political systems and global power dynamics. In this world of uncertainty, our partnership matters more than ever. This is why today's summit is so important. The European Union and South Africa are not just partners. We are strategic allies, bound by shared values of democracy, human rights, rule of law, multilateralism. Our partnerships delivers real benefits to our citizens, our economies, and the world. We are united in our commitment to peace, security, and sustainable development. And we stand together to uphold the United Nations Charter, advance the Sustainable Development Goals, and drive forward global action on climate change, poverty reduction, and economic reform. We appreciate South Africa's leadership, both regional and globally. You can count on the European Union full support as you take on the G20 presidency and as we prepare together the next European Union-African Union Summit later this year. This year marks the 25th anniversary of EU-African Union cooperation, a milestone that underscores the strength of our engagement and the vast potential ahead. Despite the many complex challenges, this is not a time for despair. It is a time for opportunity, an opportunity to build, to strengthen, and to expand our bilateral and multilateral cooperation, to shape a world that is fairer, more sustainable, and more secure. The European Union does not see the future through the lens of division between blocs, between North and South. Instead, we see an interconnected world where our fates are linked and where joint action is not an option, but a necessity. We want weaving a global network, and we start here, precisely in Cape Town, when the Atlantic and the Indic meet together. Let us use this summit to deepen our cooperation, reinforce our commitments and chart a course for an even stronger partnership. A partnership that not only benefits our nations, but contributes to a global stability and prosperity for our citizens, for our nations, and for our shared future. I wish us all a productive and successful 8th European Union South Africa Summit. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
I'd now like to ask Ursula von der Leyen to make her own remarks.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, dear Cyril, for the very warm welcome that we receive here, me and my dear friend António Costa. It's a pleasure to meet here in Cape Town. And indeed, South Africa and Europe are united by common passions, by our great literature, by our love to sport, by our beautiful nature, our excellent wines, but most importantly, we are united by shared values and common interests. Both our unions arose from the depth of conflict and suffering. Both had visionary leaders who saw that the path to peace and coexistence was not recrimination, but reconciliation. South Africa remains an emblem of hope for the world. As your great writer Albie Sachs put it, and I quote, "South Africa gives hope that all societies can heal, unite, and emerge stronger," end of quote. And indeed, in the face of an increasingly fractured world, with the return of major wars on both our continents, that message of hope matters more than ever. And the cooperation between South Africa and Europe matters more than ever. And this is why we are here today, to strengthen the already close ties between our nations and our citizens. South Africa has a vital role on the world stage. You are a leading voice of the Global South. We are united by our democratic values and our shared commitment to unity in diversity. But we are also sharing fundamental interests, from ensuring peace and stability on our continents to boosting sustainable economic growth and strengthening our supply chains. This summit is an important moment to reflect on our relationship and to see how we can strengthen it further. And I would like to highlight 3 important areas. The first is trade and investment. Here you are already our closest partner in Africa and our only strategic partner on the continent. Every year there's almost 50 billion euros in trade between us, and 98% of our exports to the European Union are already duty and quota free, but we can and we must go further. Today, we are together announcing an investment package to mobilize 4.7 billion euro in South Africa, and this is in both our interest. It includes funding for the clean energy transition, but also funding to boost vaccine manufacturing. South Africa wants to protect the health of its people as well as your autonomy and your local industries. We Europeans want to diversify some of our most critical supply chains, and we know that viruses know no borders. So that is what I call a true mutual interest. Second, today we're launching negotiations on the first ever clean trade and investment partnership. The rationale is simple. The South African economy is growing in size and complexity, and you have the ambition to create more added value here in the country. Europe understands your potential. Take the clean hydrogen value chain. South Africa has everything to become a global leader. You have clean energy in abundance from wind to sun. You have raw materials that are critical for electrolyzers, including 91% of the world's platinum group metal reserves. And you have a rising industry to produce clean hydrogen and strong export ambitions. European companies are interested in investing here, but they need more incentives. So the Clean Trade and Investment Partnership can support. Together with private companies, we can unleash investments in clean energy, raw materials, and green hydrogen. We can boost local industry with agreements for the future production that gives them certainty. And we can facilitate the trade of made in South Africa products to Europe. We want to strengthen and diversify our supply chains, but we want to do it in cooperation with you. We want beneficiation that is an important value to us. Our model is that we want to support the local jobs, the local added value, and high environmental and labor standards, because we both know that ultimately that is the best way for all of us to build more resilient global value chains. And third, we are enhancing our cooperation on science and technology. South Africa is already the best represented African country in European research programs, with funding for over 140 innovation projects across South Africa. Last year, over 1,000 South Africans came to study and teach in European universities, and we are now encouraging the exchange of even more students through your presidential PhD program. We're stepping up cooperation on research in artificial intelligence, in climate and health. So the message is very clear: Europe remains open for business and open to talented people from around the world. President Ramaphosa, dear Cyril, 2025 is a vital year for cooperation between South Africa and Europe. As we've heard, we are already working very closely, and of course we are working closely with your presidency of the G20. And I look forward to returning to Johannesburg in November for the Leaders' Summit. In a moment of increased global confrontation and competition, we must strengthen our partnership further. We must work closely together to ensure the future is built on our shared belief in cooperation and human dignity, in stable relations. We stay together the course, we give predictability and reliability, and I thank you very much for receiving us here today. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Ursula. I've been informed that members of the media usually, after hearing these wonderful speeches, want to take time off to go and digest them and rest a little bit. So would now like to allow members of the media time to go and rest, and we will see you.